But was it worth it? Well, absolutely. For under $400, I got a machine that easily handles both 4K video editing and playback, and pretty much everything else you throw at it in daily tasks. It also runs Final Cut Pro 10 and Adobe Premiere Pro CC and the entire Creative Cloud suite because it runs literally everything I need. Over the past 6 months, this Mac Pro has been my main machine for pretty much everything, from video and photo editing to longer YouTube and Netflix sessions. It has very quickly become one of my favorite computers that I've ever really used. You're watching the Mac Pro Project, Part 2. It's been a year since I bought a 10-year-old Mac Pro for just $150 US. The needs were clear. I'm a filmmaker, photographer, but above all, a broke college student. I needed a budget workstation that could handle video editing, Premiere Pro, 4K, warp stabilization, you name it. But also something that I could use as a Netflix-enabled footstool. So I set out to bring new life to a decade-old sleeping giant in an effort to build the ultimate upgradable budget Mac workstation that Apple no longer made. So grab yourself a beverage and settle in. You're watching the Mac Pro Project, Part 3. Alright, you know the drill. It's been another 6 months, and now actually almost a year since I initially started what has really become this sort of short documentary series type thing, I guess. But anyways, I have done some more upgrades to the Mac Pro that a lot of you guys have taken an interest in, really a lot more than I initially thought. I have read every comment, no I'm not kidding, every time one of you guys have left something, whether it's a suggestion, a showcase, or constructive criticism, a notification from my YouTube Studio app pops up directly on my phone, and I read it right then and right there. Unfortunately though, because there have been so many, I can't always take the time to reply to each and every one of them, but I do try to do so as much as I can because I do appreciate you guys taking the time to leave some feedback down below. But since January, I have been working on adding things to the Mac Pro bit by bit, and I'm still really not quite finished yet, but that's alright because that's the beauty of this PC Tower format, in that it's always upgradable even down the road. However, one major thing I did want to make known was that most of these parts actually came from you guys in terms of funding and literally. I am an Amazon Affiliate Program member, so every time you use my Amazon links in the description down below, and in the previous video too, you guys actually helped provide the funding for all of these parts. When you click on an Amazon affiliate link and order anything from the actual parts I linked there or something as simple like dog or cat food, Amazon sets aside a percentage of their earnings and sends some of that to me, the affiliate marketer, at no extra cost to you, the purchaser. So if you shop on Amazon often or want some of the parts from this build for yourself, using the links in the description down below is a great way to support the channel at no extra cost to you whatsoever. I was actually really humbled to see some of you guys dropping upwards of like $500 on parts using my links, which really surprised me. So naturally putting some of that back into this build felt like the right thing to do. I've also gotten plugged into several prominent Facebook groups and met many like-minded people online who have offered some great support and advice. I even had the opportunity to connect with one of you guys from the comments section down below fairly early on named Idzik, and was able to help him build a dual CPU Mac Pro overseas from scratch. I've actually kept in pretty frequent communication with him too. I actually chatted with him about an hour ago, and that 5.1 build that he has on his hands is very nice. It's really just cool though to see such a great community of like-minded individuals helping people to revitalize and rebuild these machines for daily use on the cheap. With all that being said though, let's go ahead and get into what you guys actually came here for. This time around, I'm going to be dividing this leg of the build into 3 major categories. First off, let's go ahead and get started with what I had previously dubbed the Achilles heel of this Mac Pro, the graphics card. Last time I talked about some of the issues I was experiencing from using my NVIDIA GTX 960 in my Mac Pro since it was not technically officially supported. Now, I've actually had this card for the past few years and had been using it in my PC build with pretty much no issue. macOS, however, was a little bit of a different story. Newer NVIDIA cards were being shunned by Apple, with third-party drivers required to be installed for it to even boot. In my experience, these drivers weren't quite the most stable either, with frequent screen tearing and random Premiere crashes filling my life with pure joy. This was made even worse when Apple would no longer approve the drivers for its latest software iteration, macOS Mojave, meaning that if you had an NVIDIA card that required these drivers and you wanted to update to Mojave, you were pretty much out of luck, thus requiring a natively supported or flash graphics card to even run the new OS. So of course, in order to upgrade my computer as old as the Black Eyed Peas to macOS Mojave, this was the first thing I needed to attend to. So I started looking around on eBay, but then I got a comment from one of you guys looking to sell his RX 580. I DM'd him on Instagram and went through PayPal, and $75 later, voila. This is an MXI RX 580 4GB, and for just $75, this was an absolutely fantastic value. So huge shout out to Brett for getting in touch with me and giving me such a great deal on an awesome card. Once I had the graphics card installed, I decided it was time to run a few benchmarks. So let's go ahead and just roll those now. As you can see, the addition of the RX 580 was a very solid upgrade. It allowed me to finally upgrade to Mojave and get much better rendering performance. This was especially true when it came to video editing. Working with 4K files in Adobe Premiere is a night and day difference. Playback is much smoother and I can cut through the timeline with ease, and finally gone are the random instances of screen tearing and accompanying system reboots brought about by the unstable NVIDIA drivers. macOS Mojave runs really great here as well. Once the 580 was installed, upgrading to Mojave was one of the first things I did. Everything went pretty smoothly as long as you had your 2009 4,1 model flashed to the 2010 5,1 firmware. The installer should natively recognize it and provide you with some instructions. This includes a simple BIOS firmware update very similar to that initial flash you did from the 4,1 to the 5,1 firmware, and it pretty much involves you just holding down your power button for around 10 seconds until you hear a chime. This BIOS update, however, also unlocks the full X16 speeds of the graphics cards, and it allows you to install routine system updates without a boot screen. Once everything was installed, of course, I enabled the fabled dark mode, which made everything much easier on my eyes and in turn just made the system a much more pleasant experience to use, especially in low light. Other additions like the desktop stacks help me to keep my work more organized, and things like screenshot, markup, and better file previews also solidified this as a solid upgrade all around. Now, there's one thing I want to make abundantly clear. As of WWDC 2019, macOS Mojave is the final officially supported version of macOS that the 5,1 Mac Pro will ever receive. Keyword officially. For the past few years, an individual known as DOSDude has been known to patch versions of macOS to run on older machines like the Mac Pro 1,1 through 3,1. And in most cases it runs just fine. He has recently released a patcher for the unsupported Macs for macOS 10.15 Catalina Beta, but my advice would be not to attempt this until Apple releases the final version of Catalina this fall. It's a beta, I mean, there are gonna be some bugs. With that being said though, these Macs still have plenty of life left within them, especially seeing that this upgradable design has stood the test of time and even made a recent return in the form of the 2019 new cheese grater Mac Pro. I will most likely be going this route though and patching Catalina to run on my Mac Pro on a test partition, and if it works out well then I'll just install it as my main OS. I actually got a few new pieces of tech in the house here, and really curious to see Sidecar running on this behemoth of an iPad right here. Finally, let's talk about the most recent upgrade that's made a huge difference in day-to-day use. You may remember from parts 1 and 2 that I have been using a 3.5-inch SSD mounted into a PCIe adapter as my main system drive to get better speeds. This setup worked alright and didn't really give me any major issues for the most part, but the speeds were still just a little bit lacking. I did some research and found a way to absolutely maximize my drive speeds at not too much extra cost. The setup I'm using now is a NVMe M.2 SSD. These types of Blade SSDs are known for their absolutely ludicrous read and write speeds, especially compared to their older SATA 3 ancestors. After installing the SSD into one of my PCIe slots using a cheap adapter I got off of Amazon, which you can find linked down below by the way, I went from read and write speeds of around 150 to 200 megabytes per second to over 1.5 gigabytes per second at peak speed. This of course sped everything else up across the board, from boot time to launching apps to naturally of course file transfers as well. One thing I do want to clarify here is that macOS only recognizes certain types of these Blade SSDs, so make sure you get the right one. In my case, I used a Samsung 970 EVO. Since I have my storage drives, I only needed 250 gigabytes, and that made it cheaper too. But initially I bought the Plus model, and after several random reboots and kernel panics later, I figured out that that version is not quite compatible with macOS, so make sure you grab the standard EVO. Anything from the regular EVO to the more advanced EVO Pro should work just fine. Specifically, say it with me now, not the EVO Plus. I was able to return this EVO Plus though, and after 2 weeks of shipping and a bunch of order time, I finally got a standard 970 EVO in the house. Also, both the SSD and adapter were purchased using funds earned from the Amazon affiliate links down below, so huge thanks to you guys for making all of that possible. And make sure you have that adapter, it's kind of important. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the future. Despite all that I've already done to this machine, there's two things on the list that I'd like to do with it at some point in the future. More imminently, I need to upgrade the RAM to at least 32 gigabytes. For the most part, I haven't really run into too many problems by running 16 gigabytes, but recently I had a system crash from running After Effects, Premiere Pro, Lightroom, Safari, Google Chrome, and Spotify. Maybe a bit too much, and of course that was mainly due to it running out of memory. So that is the next thing on my to-do list. I could also upgrade this to a dual CPU model, which would allow for up to 128 gigabytes of RAM to be installed, but that would require me to buy an entire CPU tray, which would run around $500 US. Not cheap. And I think I might just do that in the future. It also might not hurt to throw in a Radeon 7 at some point too, once they get actually affordable. But for now, once I upgrade the RAM, this will be my final configuration for a while. However, this does bring to mind the question, with the new 7,1 cheese grater on the way, is it still worth it to buy an old 2009 or 2010 Mac Pro? Honestly, absolutely. If you're looking for a PC format upgradable Mac with internal PCIe slots and a really good port selection that won't run you $6,000 plus the $1,000 monitor stand, just to add insult to injury, this is still one of the best prosumer options by far. Don't get me wrong, people have been wising up to this. I'm far from the only one who's bought one of these and retrofitted them. In fact, there are many people who have gone much further and dropped thousands of dollars into parts to upgrade these original cheese graters. And the price is actually starting to reflect this. At the time when I bought this a year ago, I could easily find a basic 2009 4,1 for around $150 US, like I bought it. And while it is still possible to find it for that price in some cases, the prices for these machines has been trending upward over the past year. Nowadays, some 4,1s and 5,1s have been selling from anywhere from $200 to $600 before major upgrade costs are factored in. So my advice is this: if you see one of these for a great price, buy it immediately. The new Mac Pro is great, but for the moment the prosumer market seems to be very far off of its $6,000 price tag. This value and upgradability, as well as the ability to run unsupported versions of macOS with patches, and even Windows 10 just fine, has ensured that this rig will be put to very good use by me for a very long time. But at the end of the day, it's not always the specs and price sheets that really matter. This computer was introduced over 10 years ago, and during that time, so much has changed. iPhones have gotten bigger and thousands of times more powerful, bulky laptops have become razor thin, heck, presidents have come and gone during the reign of this machine. Yet through all of that, this quirky little cheese grater has prevailed. It still performs tasks with ease that were not even dreamt of 10 years ago, all while maintaining the reliability and solid build construction that so many associate with Apple's products. While the new cheese grater might be considered very overpriced by many, if it can last even half as long as this one has, would that extra price be worth it and pay for itself in the long run? I'll leave that up to you to decide. As for me, I'll just hold on to my decade-old aluminum sculpture. You'll continue to find me lugging this 50-pound hunk of metal in between my dorm and my car, riding around for miles upon miles in the passenger seat with a rigged seatbelt. Because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. It may not be a trash can, or really the shiniest piece of new tech on the block, but it does what I need it to, when I need it to, perfectly, and then some. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I bought a 2009 Mac Pro in 2019.
Golf boy, quick.
Hold on, baby, could you wait here? Promise I'll be right back. I'ma catch a flight back. Tell me will you stay here? I don't wanna hurt you. Girl, you know I'm right, getting money and you like that. I wrote a letter for you, but you didn't write back. I wrote a letter for you, but you didn't write back. Calm down, I don't wanna fight like that, girl.
A notification has popped up on my YouTube Studio app on my phone. My phone is under the iPad. Lord. No, I'm not kidding. This is literally, okay, dude, this is my problem right here. Like, I get going on it. A lot of you guys have taken an interest. I botched that take.
Yeah, you definitely bought it.
Lordy.
Hey man, are you free tonight?
Yes. What's up?
You want to go shoot at Cafe 153 around 4:30?
Sure, yeah, I'm done with that.